Here we are. We are at our last day of learning Sefer Yehoshua, which is a big deal. We've spent now, it's 24 chapters and 22 sessions, because we combined two sets of prakim. And together, over the course of 6 months, essentially, we started off in the late spring. And now here we are, finishing Sefer Yehoshua. What a big deal. And I want to take a special moment to thank Sheldon and Cindy Small, who are the sponsors of our Siyum this morning, and this is in honor of the yahrzeit of Shelley's father, the 20th yahrzeit for Leo Small Yisrael Yehuda ben Shalom Olav Shalom. He was born and raised in East New York and graduated from City College with an accounting degree, which became ultimately his profession. Once he married, he and his wife moved to Farakwa in 1962. Had 3 children and numerous grandchildren, now Baruch Hashem, great-grandchildren, which he spent a lot of time and enjoyed very, very much. He was the Gaba in Shari Tefillah for 40 years, and upon his kever, Rish Yashar V'Leiv Tov, which very much summarizes his life. And Baruch Hashem, today you can see little Leos running around the neighborhood, who are, Be'ezra Hashem, going to be living up to his namesake, their namesake, Be'ezra Hashem B'Karov. Thank you for sponsoring this. And it's been really a wonderful journey. For so many of us, this has been like a first of doing this like in this really rigorous way. We're really spending a lot of time, not just like a few minutes going through this. I thank everybody for joining. We're actually there's a special hadran to be said at the end of finishing a book of Nach, so we'll do that at the end. But let's start right now at the end of Yehoshua. The 24th and last chapter of the book of Yehoshua is a speech. It is the last speech that Yehoshua gives to his people. And it is a very, very interesting speech. Let's do a quick summary, and then there are lots and lots of questions. Be'ezrat Hashem. So the first thing is that he gathers all the nation of Israel, everybody, men, women, children, in a place called Shechem. And that's where he has his last speech. Okay. Now he says to them the following. He does a sort of historical review. And he says to them, that you came from really backwards background. You came from Terach, and Terach was an idolater. And Avram saw the light, and then I chose his son Yitzchak, and then I chose his son Yaakov among the children. And then the Esav went off to Seir, and Yaakov continued, and their children went to Egypt, and I saved them from Egypt. And after I saved them from Egypt, I took them out. I took them to the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea, and the Egyptians pursued them. I protected them. I brought you into the land of Israel. I helped you fight in Jericho. I helped you overcome 7 nations, and now you're here. So sort of a very long historical description, and that is all in the Psukim Beis to Tesvav. That's the main section of the historical part of our perek, and he goes and he describes that how he conquers the lands. In Pasuk Yud Beis he says, he sends this type of fly, it seems, ahead of them to chase out the enemies. And at the end of this he says, in Pasuk Yud Dalet, the culmination is Ata Yiru Es Hashem V'ivdu Esai B'samim Uve'emes. Serve and fear God in truth. V'asiru es Elohim asher avdu avoseichem be'ever anar v'mitzrayim v'ivdu es Hashem. And now it is time to abandon the pagan gods that your fathers served in Trans-Jordan. This actually refers to Trans-Euphrates in the Abrahamic days and the days of Mitzrayim. You need to remove this. And if you don't want to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then and you want to serve other gods, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will consume you. You will not survive this land. Okay, so everybody is very aroused by this speech. This is a very powerful speech. And they turn to Yehoshua and they say, God forbid, we will never leave God. We're going to serve Hashem, and we're committed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's what they respond in Psukim Tes Zayin to Yud Ches. And Yehoshua turns back to them and says in the dialogue in Pasuk Yud Tes, Vayami Yehoshua la'am la'isuchru la'avodas Hashem. You may not be to serve God, like you're saying, Ki Elokim kedoshim hu, Hashem is holy. Kael kanohu la'yisol pishachem la'chosachem. He's not going to tolerate your sins. He's not going to tolerate infidelity. And so then he goes on, and the people say, no, we're still going to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the dialogue continues, it's backwards and forwards. And then he says to them, Eidim atem, pasuk of Beis, you are witnesses. Ki atem b'chartem es Hashem la'avoda so vayamru eidim. You are witnesses, and they said, we are, in fact, witnesses. He then admonishes them to remove the pagan gods from among them, and in pasuk Chavav, he now writes these matters b'sefer Torah Selakim on a parchment. Vayikach even gedola, and he takes a large stone, vaykimer sham tachas ayla asher b'mikdash Hashem, and he places it under a large oak tree, which is by the sanctuary of God, and they establish this as a witness. And then we hear that Yehoshua finally passes away. He's buried in a place called Timnas Serach in Har Ephraim, the mountains of Ephraim. And then the very end of Sefer Yehoshua describes in Pasuk Lamed Beis, "Ves atzmos Yosef asher helu b'nei Yisrael miMitzrayim kavru b'Shechem." Then finally, full circle, the bones of Joseph are buried in Shechem as he asked them to do. Okay, so let's just do a quick recap of the perek itself, because there's a number of details. Yehoshua gets up there, gathers the people, it's in Shechem. He tells them, historically, HaKadosh Baruch Hu led you to this point. You now need to serve God. They say, we're going to serve God. And he says, well, it requires a lot of fidelity. You're going to have to remove the pagan gods. They said, no, we're really into it. He warns them again. They commit themselves. He then makes them witnesses upon themselves, establishes this large stone, and that's the end of the speech. He passes away and he's buried. That's sort of the general flow of this perek. It's not so much of a speech as much a dialogue. So let's do a few basics. The first thing that you should notice, now that we're more sensitive to the text, because we spent a little bit of time in this, is that actually this is the wrong place. So if you'll notice this right now, he is in Shechem, which is strange because Shechem is not the capital of Israel right now. The capital of Israel is a place called Shiloh. Shiloh is where the nation of Israel should be, right? So why are they hanging out? Now, just to understand the difference. So Shechem is in the north, and Shiloh is a little further south in Har Ephraim. It's not so much of a difference. It's all along the biblical highway. So if you remember David Freeman's film, right? It's all north-south down the center of Israel. It's called the biblical highway, what we call today Route 60. And so Shechem is further north than Shiloh. Why would he do that? Why would he choose Shechem as his last speech, not Shiloh, which is where the Mishkan is, and which is where all the we'll call political, military decisions have been made up till now since they conquered the land? So there are a number of reasons why. The first reason is because if you remember, the first place that Avraham came to when he came to the land of Israel in Parshas Lech Lecha, we're told is Vayavor Avram ba'aretz ad makom Shechem. The first place that he came to was Shechem ad lemorev aknani oz ba'aretz. The Canaanites were there in the land, which means, in a certain sense, he's finishing his tenure in the place that Abraham started. That makes sense? Meaning, Avraham Avinu's first foray into the land of Israel is where Yehoshua is finishing off his career, in a certain sense saying, we are standing in the footsteps of our patriarch, right? Meaning, we are the first entrance into the land of Israel, which is why the end of my career is like the beginning of Avram's career in Shechem. So it does have meaning. Before Shiloh was a thing, or mentioned in the Torah, the first place that was mentioned was Shechem. And Avraham Avinu came to that place, so he's sort of closing that loop. Another reason is because Shechem happens to be the first acquisition that is bought in the land of Israel to live in. Right? Meaning, we know that there were the first acquisition of a Israelite or a Hebrew buying a piece of land in Israel is clearly Hebron, right? So down south. Right? That was for burial, that wasn't for living. This is the first place where we know Yaakov buys Chelkas HaSadeh. He buys a section of the field and ultimately settles in. So the first place that a Hebrew buys a piece of the land. You know, the irony is, why would Yaakov Avinu buy it and not conquer it? He's seeking legitimacy, right? Meaning he's saying, this is not military conquest. I'm going to seek legitimacy by buying it, so I have the deed, and there's not going to be a problem. There are 3 places in Israel that Jews have bought in the times of the Bible, and they are Hebron, Shechem, and Jerusalem, right? Because the place of the Mikdash was Temple Mount was bought by David. They are the 3 most contested places in Israel. Meaning, ironically, the places that we sought the most legitimacy are the places that everybody else thinks, as latecomers, that they have rights to. Okay, so to Shechem today, you can't set foot in. It's so dangerous. But the paradox, the irony of it. But nonetheless, from Yehoshua's perspective, before Islam was created, he is saying, look, this is the first place we bought. I'm coming back to our rights, not just as given from God, but we actually bought this as another perspective as well. There's another reason as well, and that is that what happened in Shechem was a little bit of a fiasco, right? So the children of Yaakov killed the people of Shechem. There was a massacre that took place there. And after that, Yaakov was very concerned about what would happen with the neighbors. So it's not very good neighborly conduct to massacre, a local tribe. So he was very concerned about what happened. And we're told in the Torah, in source 4, Vayisol Vayi Chitas Elokim Al He'orim Asher Sivoseihem V'loi Rodfu Acharei B'nei Yaakov. There was a miracle. There was a miracle that none of the local tribes who shared blood and peace with the Shechemites took action to take revenge. Which means, in a certain sense, if you see what Yehoshua is trying to do, he's trying to recreate that protection. Meaning he's saying, I'm disappearing, and there's obviously a lot of qualms, a lot of fears about the future, but don't worry, this is a place where we were protected even after we killed off the locals and there were remaining locals. Which is exactly what he did, right? Meaning they've just now conquered the land, but there are lots of remaining locals, as we'll meet, God willing, in Sefer Shoftim. Many locals who are going to take up arms. But he's saying we're going to be protected we're channeling that aura of protection. Fascinating. And there's so many biblical echoes. But the most fascinating biblical echo is what happens right after that. If you go into Bereshis, perek lamed hey, this is most often the overlooked part of Parshas Vayishlach, because at this point the action's over, right? The meeting with Esav has happened, the Dinah fiasco is finished. After that, there's this dialogue, and Yaakov Avinu tells them, remove Elohei hanechor asher bekerechem, remove the foreign gods in your midst. And he tells them to bury them in Shechem. Isn't that fascinating? As Yehoshua is doing the same thing as Yaakov. What he's saying to the people is, bury your pagan gods here in Shechem, like Yaakov Avinu told his children to bury the pagan gods. What to see what those pagan gods are. I mean, it sounds like they were well behaved up till now. Where are they coming from? We'll get to in a second. But clearly, biblically, the parallels here. Meaning clearly he's doing the same thing as Yaakov Avinu is doing. So there are multiple echoes that are necessary for Yehoshua to just choose this place. Which, meaning if we're just reading this like, sort of laissez-faire and just going through like, oh, Shem. No. There's a lot of meaning over here because it is clearly intentional. It is not the capital of Israel at this point in time. It's further north, and nonetheless he chooses. So there are a lot of reasons. In addition, if you fast forward in Jewish history, Rashi points out, take a look at source 7, Rashi says, it is a place where there is a lot of punishment, there's a lot of problems in the future. Sham kilkulu ashvatim. That's where the tribes had a problem. Sham inu estir, that was where the rape of Dinah happened. Sham nechalakam malchus dveis David. So meaning to say like this: where Dinah was raped, and there was this whole episode that happened afterwards. That was in Shechem. Then later on, where was Yosef sold? That was in Shechem. When he came to Shechem to check on his brothers. And later on, where is the kingdom of Israel going to split into 2 Jewish states? Is also in Shechem. That's where it's going to happen, which means say, this is a place of divide. Shem is always a place of divide, which is why Yehoshua specifically actually leans into that negativity in a certain sense. I believe this is what is happening. He's saying, I want to keep it as a one federation. I wanted to keep it as not simply as tribal states. So this is what he does over here, is in order to be able to hold this all together. I think, very profound perspective, sort of leaning into the historical hairline fractures and trying to tape them over as long as it will last. And by the way, somewhat more successfully, as we will see in the coming weeks. So this is just about geography, folks. We didn't even get into the speech. This is just the geography, but the geography has so much here. Let's take it one step further. So you'll notice that actually Yehoshua gives 2 speeches. This is kind of like at the dinner where somebody gives an introduction to the introduction. You know how it works? It's like a very Jewish thing, and after like 10 minutes, it's like I remember actually Richard Joel got up there and once and after like 13 introductions, and he says Winston Churchill used to say that everything has been said, but not everybody has said it. So sometimes that's how it goes. But why does he give 2 last speeches? So the answer is very simple. Number one is the audience has shifted. If you go back to perek Chav Gimel, as we just recently learned, you'll see that the audience is the Zakanim, is the elders, it's his officers, it's the people in his inner cabinet who he needs to speak to and instruct. And we saw that was because they were probably already seeing his infirmity, they were probably seeing his old age, and he wanted to nip it in the bud and tell them, I know what's happening, I want you to know that don't be afraid when I'm recessing. Right, that was what his first speech. This is not to the elders. This is to all of Israel. This is a national convocation. Happens to be interesting, fun point about the geography. If anybody's visited Har Grizim, Bezrat Hashem, we will be in 3 weeks' time. There is what's called orchestral perfection between the valleys, which means Har Grizim is on the one side, Har Eval is on the other side. There's a valley in the middle of the valley is Nablus, is Shechem. Right? And what is interesting is, if you remember, the whole blessings and curses, they went on the 2 mountains, right? There were 2 groups of people. So there were no microphones in those days. It happens there's orchestral perfection, which means to say that acoustic perfection, which means that it's easy to hear a voice in the valley on a still day on both sides, which is fascinating, which also makes sense why his speech is happening to all of Israel in this place. It happens to be that it is easier to hear in this particular valley on both sides. So he's speaking to all of Israel. Here he is speaking. By the way, don't try going to the valley yourselves these days without army escort, because it's not a safe place to be. But the tour guide who I was with, who did, told that to us when we were there. Anybody who's been with Ira Rappaport up to Har Grizim, you'll understand what I mean. Nonetheless, this is a place where everybody is able to hear. Another reason is, and Rabbi points this out, is that the previous speech was a monologue. Monologues are not so effective when gauging the temperature, because I can speak as long as I want, but I don't know what other people are thinking. This speech is a dialogue. So he's actually asking them where they stand. He isn't confident enough by just speaking to them. He wants to actually hear where they're at, which is why you see them answering, then him push him back, and then him answering again. Meaning he's like, I don't think you're up to this. And they're like, no, we're up to this. He needed that. Before he passed away, he needed to hear the people on the same page. This is why the speech is different. Okay? So now, it is interesting, by the way, the parallel, of course, seems to be very clear in Moshe Rabbeinu's life, because at the end of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, what did he do? We have a parasha called Nitzavim, right? And the parasha begins, Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem lifnei Hashem Elokechem, Roshechem, Shiftechem, the whole business, right? Tapechem, Neshechem, Gerocha, Shebekerav Achanecha, Vechotev Etzecha, Ad Shavemecha, La'avrocha Bivris Hashem Elokecha. So Moshe Rabbeinu did this in his life. He got everybody together, the whole nation, and he warned them about misbehavior, and he warned them the repercussions, and he warned them about people who are thinking in their hearts that maybe I'm just going to do my own thing. Moshe Rabbeinu did the same thing. Yehoshua is replicating what his master did essentially at the end of his life. So very clearly, this is the way to do this. We don't see this kind of speech for the next 300 plus years, meaning to say there's not going to be a single leader afterwards who's able to bring all of Israel together. We'll see tribal leaders, but the tribal leaders do not have are not at the behest of the entire people. So this is a very unique moment which is able to continue one generation past Moshe Rabbeinu as well. Now, here's an interesting point in methodology. If I were to ask you, it says, how do you know that Avraham Avinu had this whole complicated upbringing and childhood, and his parents were pagans, right? So you'll say, well, we know that. Like he was the idol shop and discovering God and the whole Terach and the whole business. If you ask your average Jew, where is that written? Like, where is that written? They say it's in the Torah, right? So you say, well, look in the Torah, right? Look in the Torah. So it's interesting. Lech Lecha is already too late because that's already when he's on his journey, right? So you say, go to the end of Nach. If you go to the end of Nach, you actually see nothing of that. And we see nothing of that. We just hear about his life, and then we hear about this place called Ur-Kasdim. Haran dies, he marries Yiska, and they're on their way. So we don't see that at all. So your average person who's educated said, but I remember learning in school that Terach was an idolater, right? So here's the thing. The reason why this is because the pasuk is in Yehoshua, at the end of Yehoshua in Ara Perek. Right, which is we just saw it a second ago. Is that at the beginning of his speech he says Terach avi Avraham in pasuk beis v'avi Nachor v'avdu Elohim acherim v'akachas avichem es Aram Erev Nachor. Right, meaning the pasuk which describes Terach and Nachor being idol worship is actually in Yehoshua. The reason why we know it so well is because the Haggadah, as we know, it's set up as in a model what's called Maschilim B'Gnus Masayim B'Shevach. It starts off with negative background and ends with a positive outcome. And there's a debate in the Gemara between Rav and Shmuel as to what is the negative background, what's the bad baggage. Is it that we were slaves in Egypt, or do you reach further back to our spiritual backwardness, and that is that Terach was an idolater? So we do both. Our Agada has Avodim Hayinu, which is we'll call our physical disgrace, and then Mitchila Avdei Avodah Zarah Yovasenu, that is then quotes these psukim in Yehoshua, which means when your average person who knows about the story, they are actually going to the Medrash. The Medrash is very explicit, and it goes on for a long way. The Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah, and it goes on to describe in perek Lamed Ches, and Aaron Avinu was at the idol worship shop, and people would come and you'd say to them, "How old are you?" And they'd say, "I'm 60 years old." And he says, "Why would a 60-year-old serve a one-day-old? Because we just made this yesterday, right?" And then there's like all the interesting dialogue. But that Medrash, that subtext in the Torah, is clearly based on Sefer Yehoshua, which means the earliest text we have is here, not there, which is really important to appreciate just methodologically. We, generally speaking, are educated where it's almost as if there's a continuum between Medrash and text and Torah. Just appreciating there is a difference between Torah Sheba'al Peh and Torah Shebichsav. But this is a fascinating example where the Medrash itself is based on a tradition which emanates from the Torah Shebichsav itself. But the Torah Shebichsav is not in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses. It's found in Sefer Yehoshua. Just to appreciate the sort of steps necessary to appreciate this, because your average school child does not know this. They take it as it's all the same textual canon, right? It's the same. It's not. It's more complicated in terms of the history, and we probably know Sefer Yehoshua perek Dalet more than any other places in Tanakh because of the Agada. But you didn't realize we were quoting Sefer Yehoshua. So the next time you get to Agada and you see the quotations, you'll be very comfortable knowing now what the context is for that. There was the historical speech Yehoshua gave going back to Avraham Avinu. Just to appreciate this, I think it's important to appreciate this. Little just historic note. He describes in vanquishing the enemies, he sends before them this tzira, right? And the Torah talks about this tzira as well. And what is the tzira? So the Radak says it's a type of insect that would sting people in their eyes. So that it was very hard for people to survive. The Steinsaltz, Rabbi Steinsaltz in his commentary on Tanakh says, it was a hornet. He says large swarms of flying, stinging hornets can disperse an entire army. Alternately, tzira is some sort of disease or something else that spreads terror. Today we have a little more of an appreciation of what that means, right? Meaning to say, it's tzira. The Torah does not have a word for bacteria or virus because people at the time the Torah was given did not have the knowledge to know what a virus or bacteria was. But it is possible that the Torah will use words like a fly to describe something very small which can cause colossal damage. And we today know what epidemics look like and the proportions of destruction that are in front of it. It is possible there's some sort of, we'll call it epidemic that is occurring in the wake that Israel is attacking the land of Israel, which is just really fascinating in terms of we think our military conquest. Well, yes, military conquest augmented by multiple natural disasters that are occurring as well, which vanquishes the enemy. Really, really profound. Now, coming back to the next question, which is, why in the world did Yehoshua tell them to drop their pagan gods? Does he not trust them? Meaning, like from our perspective, we haven't seen any misbehavior. We're going to see lots of misbehavior later on. But right now, we have no reason to believe that the nation of Israel had done anything wrong from a polytheistic perspective. Why is that? Why is he distrusting them to ask them to bury this? So if you look at in source 18, the Ralbag says, no, you know what it is? It's a prophecy. It's not about now. He's saying, I'm asking you to bury your future. That's a very profound perspective, meaning, I know what you're going to do. I know that your inclinations are. I know that you're going to be enculturated. Bury it now. That's what he's saying to them. I know what's going to happen. The Metzora says, no, he's not burying the future, he's burying the past. He's burying the past because you've been among Egyptians. And in the Egyptian culture, go to Egypt and see, it's a crazy polytheistic culture. You see, how they treat the afterlife, all their gods, all the pictures, all the this, all that. It says, lo yecharatz kelev l'shana, the whole thing. One of the Egyptian gods is the dog. Right? It's like there's multiple layers of what all these things mean. The Egyptians are serving everything. They were serving cats and dogs and snakes, the whole thing. So don't bury that. Bury your cultural norms. You're an immigrant now to a new religion. So bury everything of the past. That's what the Metzora says. But I believe that I think the most accurate interpretation is that of the Radak. The Radak says, you know what it means? It's very simple. You've just conquered a land and you've taken the wealth of your victims, right? You've taken all the wealth, the assets. Those assets include much polytheism, meaning, just practically speaking, you've taken images, you've taken pots and pans which have images on them. You've taken gold images, silver images from your enemies. That's not legitimately yours. You have to bury that. Here's an example of a pot I put in, which is inscribed just around the rim. Ish Baal ben Beda, right? In Kirbat Kaifa, which is Baal. Anything which is Baal, Baal is one of the Canaanite gods, right? So you can imagine an Israelite having just conquered a city, right? And they're dividing the wealth, but in and amongst that wealth is actually pagan deities. So you're saying to them, it's not I'm saying that you're serving these, but it's going to come to that. It's only a matter of time. Bury what you've acquired, which makes so much sense. And that is exactly what was happening with Yaakov Avinu. Coming back to that. Why did Yaakov Avinu say, bury the Elohei Nechar, the other gods in Shechem? Why was it the sons of Yaakov Avinu serving? No, they just looted the city of Shechem. The city of Shechem was replete with Avodah Zarah. So things which you think are useful household utensils happen to be gods. Bury them. That's not legitimately yours. That's what's happening. I believe that's exactly what's happening. It's the same thing. Just conquer the land of Israel. Bury the pots, the pans, the images that have the names, bear the names of pagan gods. Now, a few little other details. It sounds like Yehoshua is pushing back a lot. And he's saying, you're not going to be able to succeed in serving God. That's what he actually says to them. And they say, no, we are. It's like, I don't know, that doesn't sound like, that's not the great pep talk you're expecting from a leader. You can do it. It's like, no, you can't do it. So what is he saying? So he's saying like this. The way that the Malbim explains it is like HaKadosh Baruch Hu has hashkacha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu works with you to the degree you let him in. But if you're not going to let him in, right, if you're not going to let him in, he's going to leave you to chance. So what I'm saying is like this, is understand that inviting God into your life requires a lot of behavior, a lot of regulating the way you live. But with that comes Hashem in your life. But if you don't, he's going to leave you to the dog-eat-dog world out there. Meaning, it is your choice. You can't do this. I'm telling you now, if you decide to invite him in, it comes with responsibility. You can't have God in shul, and then when you go to work, he's somewhere else. It can't be that the parties on Saturday night with the Canaanite friends, right? It requires a whole, and that's what he's saying, is it's a very onerous responsibility to be a Jew as well. It also speaks to the very big, important difference between polytheism and monotheism. You see, from the polytheistic perspective, so let's say you have an Israelite who's living next to a Canaanite, right? And then they go out, they take the same wagon to work together, they have the commute, and they get talking, and then they go for barbecues together, and their kids get friendly, and his daughter falls in love with his son, right? This is the way these things work, right? And so now you can imagine like each of the children explaining it to their parents, right? So when it comes to the let's say the Canaanite girl, right? And she comes to her parents and says, "Oh, Mom and Dad, I met this really great guy, and we grew up together. We're playing in each backyards, and you used to commute to work in the same wagon." And so they would say, "Look, it's a little bit of a different culture." He says, "Yeah, but it's all right." So from the polytheistic perspective, is it a betrayal to marry a monotheist? The answer is no. Just add him to the collection. Meaning like this. We already serve the wind god. We already serve the rain god. There's the Hebrew god. Okay. What I'm saying? We'll just put homages. We'll pay homages to all of them. Because polytheism does not exclude more gods. Right? Polytheism by nature means there's multiple forces that you need to appease. The problem is from the monotheist perspective, by definition, there's only one God. And now you're stuck. And that's the problem. Yehoshua is saying is that monotheism isn't as pluralistic as polytheism is. So your neighbors are going to be more welcoming than you are going to be able to welcome them. It doesn't work to say, I'm going to pay off Baal at the same time as paying off HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It doesn't work like that. And that's going to be a complete failure all the way through. Is they're going to think like polytheists. They're going to say, I'll serve God and. That's what they're going to say. And they don't realize that there's no and. That's what Yehoshua is trying to emphasize right now. We'll see some examples of this, Be'ezras Hashem, in our tour, and God willing in Sefer Shoftim. Okay, now just a few other basic questions. Witnesses. Yehoshua says, you are witnesses. Have you ever signed a document like that? I'm lending you a carload of cash, and I'm going to make you the witness. It's like, yeah, it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. You're not going to see that cash. Right? So how does that work? You make them the witnesses. Exactly. So the Malabim says, no, he's just saying to them, I want you to choose this on your own volition. I'm not forcing this down your throat. I want you to witness that you're choosing it, meaning I want you to say yes, say amen, right? And then it's all good. But the way the Radak says, a very profound observation is, he says, no, your souls and your body. Your souls and your body are witness to this as well. Fascinating. Because like what's left of self after that. But your souls and your body, he says, like ha'azinu hashamayim va'aretz v'adabeira. The heavens and the earth. Heavens and the earth is spirit and the body, right? But on the microcosm is your spirit and your body is listening to this. You're the witnesses in it. Like Moshe Rabbeinu's last speech of ha'azinu, the song, the witness song, is now the witness over here, which is going to be your souls and bodies as well. Now, this stone is really fascinating because Yehoshua sets up the stone and he says it's going to be an aid. In the Christian world, they call this the witness stone. This is what it's called, right? The witness stone of the covenant of Joshua in perek Chav Beis, Chav Dalet. So what? First of all, it says it's placed in the Migdash Hashem, the sanctuary of God. Little fun fact: the sanctuary of God is not in Shechem; it's in Shiloh. So where were they placing it exactly? So the Rashi says that when they did the ceremony, they brought the ark, they brought the Aron, and they established it next to the Aron right now where the Aron was at this moment of convocation, which is where it belongs. I was interested to find out where the stone actually is today, and it turns out to be that we can actually find the stone according to a number of research. So just take a look on page 8 for a second. You will see this is a air view of Nablus. Right? Nablus is really called Shechem. Okay, and if you look on the top area, which is unpopulated, that area is Mount Ebal. Right? That's Har Eval. In the south section, when there's non-populated, is Har Grizim. Okay, as we know, Shechem is directly between the two mountains. So today we can go up to Har Grizim, and Be'ezras Hashem, I'm working on the military escort to Har Eval right now, because it is very exciting to get there. It's very, very unusual to be able to get there. But in the middle is over there is Shechem. Now you can see that the modern day Nablus stretches both directions, to the right to the left. But essentially in the center, you see where that little red marker, or the marker is where we're looking at. And if you zoom in between those buildings there, that's all the Arabs over there. In the center of there is like a little park area that's called Tel Balata. If you zoom in a little further, it's called the Archaeological Park. And in that archaeological park, you zoom in further on page 9, it is called the Ancient Shechem. That is where Ancient Shechem is, in the center of today's Nablus. I so wish we could get there, but the military will not even allow us to be escorted there. Okay? Because this, as you can see, it's completely surrounded by buildings, so it's a danger from snipers. You can't even... Right, the Kever Yosef is on the right-hand side of it. If you see in the top picture on page 9, Kever Yosef is on the right, which is exactly our perek, right? Makes sense, right? Because it's right outside Shechem, meaning the real Shechem. If you go into the actual Shechem itself, there's a temple, a very, very large temple. You see the size of those walls. Those walls are very, very thick. And then outside of it, you see on the edge, there's a circle, a semicircle. There is a standing stone there, okay? Actually, there's 3 standing stones, 2 in the entrance and 1 in the front. And if you go to the top of page 10, you can see it from the side. This is actually today a picture from recently. There's a standing stone. That standing stone is broken in half. And in the book From Ramses to Shiloh by Dr. Brian Wood, he says, since the temple existed in Joshua's day, it is possible that this was the large stone he set up under the oak that was by the sanctuary of the Lord in Shechem. That's Joshua 24:26. That's our perek. The stela is undoubtedly the pillar where Avimelech was made king. We'll see that later on in Sefer Shoftim, perek Vav. We'll see why that's a very complicated time with Avimelech later on. But he believes that this is the stone we are referring to now. That's pretty wild because we're talking about 3,200 years. Really, this is a very significant thing. Interestingly enough, this stela, this large standing stone, was discovered in 1926 by a German archaeologist called Ernest Sellen. And when he arrived at this ancient Shechem area and he found this large stone, at the beginning they thought it was a water trough, the area. Then he realized the significance of this. And at that point in time, one of the people in his team, by a man of Dr. Gabriel Welter, strongly opposed the discovery of the stone. He believed that he did not want to believe this was in fact the standing stone of Joshua, and he toppled it over the edge. Right? So you can see there's an edge of the parapet of the edge of this over here, and he broke it further. But Later on, archaeologist Ernest Wright realized what had happened, and he put the stone back into its trough, even though it's broken, it's half broken right now, in 1960, and that's what we have today. It's interesting that it clearly was a much taller stone. It was clearly much taller than it was, and when it comes to stones, we just see stones. It was likely covered by lime with writing on it, meaning we're only seeing the remainder. We just see a stone. But it's very probable there was lime over it, and there was writing on it, which is what Yehoshua was doing. He was giving them a witness. That is pretty remarkable, because it's exactly in the place where Shechem is, exactly next to the Kever Yosef, and we have this large standing stone, which is attributed by archaeologists back to the times of Yehoshua and Avimelech, which is two stories that occur right here in Shechem. That's pretty wild. Let's go a little further. Now, you say, so let's go geography. Where is Yehoshua buried? So we're told in Tanakh that he's buried in a place called Timnas Serach. Why is it called Timnas Serach? So Rashi says a very interesting thing. He says because the word, it says Timnas Serach because they put a picture of the Chama, of the sun, on his grave. Where Yehoshua is buried, they put a picture of, why would there be a picture of a sun on his grave? Because he stopped the sun. And which is fascinating, which means to say, is that, and Rashi says that when people would pass by his grave, they would say, wow, the person who stopped the sun passed away. Meaning there'd be like this disappointment that something so great could even meet their end as well when they saw this. But if you look in Sefer Shoftim, it's called Timnas Cheres as well. And Rashi points out that in fact it was a very dry land. He did not give himself he gave himself a very arid, not a very agricultural place to be buried, but ultimately that flourished and was masriach. It was sort of dripping with fruit juice afterwards as well. Very fascinating. Now, here's the interesting thing. Where is it today? So if you go on to Tuba, Iraq. Tuba, Iraq is a tour company in Iraq. I don't advise it, right? Certainly not with an American or Israeli passport. But in Tuba, Iraq, they have discovered the tomb of Joshua. It is in Iraq. Amazing. And they describe that there, just in the burial ground is Joshua ben Ibn Nun, right? One of Iraq's archaeological heritage sites in Baghdad's Sheikh Maruf Cemetery. Amazing. On the city's Kark side. And it describes that he was a prophet who lived in the 12th and 13th century. Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi stated that he was buried in Baghdad in the area of Al-Shunizia, based on the will of Abdullah ibn Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And the prophet of Joshua is believed to be one of the prophets of Islam, and he's mentioned in the Quran as a prophet who was given knowledge and guidance from Allah. He's also mentioned in Christian and Jewish traditions. It really is remarkable. I mean, such corruption of fact, meaning they took him as their own. Now, he existed way before Muhammad was even born. Right, I don't know how they square that with anything, but nonetheless, this is they sort of absorb him as their own, and he's buried ultimately in Iraq. The misunderstanding is very simple. Just understand in this particular case, is this kever, which is a kever in Iraq, and of course there's Arabic written all over it, but is in fact the kever of Yehoshua Kohen Gadol. Okay. Which, if you look at the Iraqi Jewish community, they say they attribute this to Yehoshua Kohen Gadol. It was a Kohen Gadol in the times of the Second Temple, the very end of the Second Temple. Why he's here, I don't know, but they attribute this to his grave. It seems that the Muslims, in trying to reclaim other heritages, took Yochanan, Yehoshua Kohen Gadol, and they turned it into Yehoshua ibn Nun, right, as a kever. But folks, I'm sorry, they got the wrong text. When you make up religions and you take other people's, you clearly make lots of mistakes. So he is not buried in Baghdad. He's buried in Timnas Serach in Har Ephraim. Har Ephraim is the mountain of Ephraim. We know that where that is. So the generally accepted place is a place called Kefil Haris, which is actually a Palestinian village. And you can go there with military escort. Be'ezrat Hashem, we're waiting for our permission to go through, but we're hoping to visit it. And as you can see, it's completely graffitied by Arabic because of their deep respect for other cultures. But Jews go to the daven there all the time. And in fact, it's actually very near. There's a number of other kfarim which are also there as well. And this is seen to be where it is. It's right actually to the west of Ariel, which we know where that is, and to the east of Revava. It is interesting to note that as of 2022, the Jerusalem Post published an article that one of the Israeli archaeologists, whose name is Dr. Raviv Devir Aviv. I actually found another location a little further to the east west of Ravava, where he believes it actually is the real place, which is Kirbat Tibna, which is not occupied or involved with anybody's living at all. And they started their dig 3 years ago. We don't know there's not been any news since then, if there's been any findings in Kirbat Tibna. Based on the picture they put in the article in the Jerusalem Post, I identified at the bottom of page 13 as a place just to the you see Chalamish there? It's just the west of Chalamish, because I found it based on the road orientation. Do you see the prongs in the road, the central road 2 coming out? That is that little hilltop there. So there is a new suggestion as to the place of Yehoshua's burial. As of now, it's still a site which is being excavated as we speak. So we don't know yet, but there's a number of reasons to believe that it's in that area, in that location. Very, very interesting. Last point over here. As he finishes this speech, he passes away. He's buried in Tinas Cheres, and then we're told that the bones of Yosef were also allowed to rest in Shem, which is where they are today. Also, one of the most venerated burial sites by the Arabs, destroyed on a monthly basis based on their innate inability to get along with any other religions. But nonetheless, why is this put over here? So Radak points out 2 things. He points out, number 1, is that the burial is attributed to Yehoshua, not to Moshe, which is fascinating, because Moshe is the one who took the bones, brought the bones for 40 years. Yehoshua led them to rest, but it goes on Yehoshua's name, because the person who finishes the mitzvah is the one who's attributed to. But it's also because it was in Har Ephraim, which is Lechavod Yosef, Kavruba Nachla Rishona Asher Yaakov Avinu. So it was first of all his own ancestral territory, Har Ephraim, and he buried him in the place where Yaakov Avinu bought the Chelkas HaSadeh, which ultimately he felt was the most appropriate place just outside of Shechem to bury the ancestor Yosef. I would also point out that it is fascinating, because how old was Yehoshua when he passed away? 110. How old was Yosef when he passed away? Was 110. There certainly is a full closing of the circle over here, where Yehoshua, the descendant, is burying his ancestor, who he very much reflects, this international figure, this Jewish leader from the tribe of Yosef, of Ephraim, who's now burying his ancestor. There's a very full sense of closure as we arrive at this moment in time, where Sefer Yehoshua ends, closing the ultimate story of the Shvatim back from Parashas Vayechi, is now closing in Sefer Yehoshua. So much over here, folks, and people just think it's the speech. But there's so much more in this topic as well. What we're going to do is, if that's all right, is there is a special hadran, which is a conclusion passage, which is said at the end of learning a Sefer Tanakh. We spent a lot of time doing this. We spent 6 months doing this. I'd like to say this with everybody together. This is actually found it's based on the text which is found in the Big Day Sheish on Sefer Shoftim, and also found in certain chumashim at the end of the Akafos and Simchas Torah. And Rabbi Yonah Rees put together this text specifically. So here we go. Ready? Hadran alach Sefer Yehoshua, da'atach alach v'da'atach alon Sefer Yehoshua. Lo nisnasha minach v'lo nisnasha minon lo ba'alma hadayin v'lo ba'alma da'asi. That sounds familiar. That sounds like a regular siyam, but it's slightly different. V'yiratzanu fonecha Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu Asher bachar b'niviyim tovim v'ratzah b'divreihem anemarim b'emes v'yischus Sefer Yehoshua mimikrai kodesh v'yischus psukeihem v'tevoseihem v'osiyoseihem v'nekuroseihem v'tamayhem v'shemos hakadoshim yotzeimehem v'yischus niviyei emes shoftei Yisrael v'tzadikei adoros hamuskarim b'Sefer Yehoshua nizker liyos noam Hashem Eloheinu aleinu ma'aseh yadenu konenu aleinu ma'aseh yadenu konenu liyos zaychim hayom b'yom chasunosenu v'yom simchas libeinu lo oirer im ha'em abonim smecha le'yached soid ha'torah shebechsav im soid torah shebal peh b'yichud hashlim ba'ava v'achva v'reus ha'alanema b'chol duvarav yamshich olenu shefa or ha'chaim lenefesh ruach neshama la'arich yomeinu b'toi v'yiras Hashem kol hayomim v'arevna Adonai Eloheinu es divrei soroscha b'finu fi amcha beis Yisrael v'nanachnu v'tzetzoenu v'tzetzoei amcha beis Yisrael koloni yoda shemecha v'loinda sorosecha lishma v'nismach v'na'alois b'divrei Talmud torasecha v'misosecha v'chokesecha le'olam va'ed ki hem chayenu v'arich yomeinu v'ayim nagei yom v'alala yi Adonai Eloheinu imonu kasher imav asenu al yazvenu al yitzenu la'itiv levavenu Eilav lo leches b'chol drochav lishmo mitzvosav v'chokosav mishpotav asher tzivo es avosenu yiratzon mevnecha Adonai Eloheinu v'leosenu shekashem shazartanu l'sayim Sefer Yehoshua ממקרא הקודש, כן תעזרנו להמשיך ללמוד ספרים מתורה שבכתב ומתורה שבעל פה ולסיימם, ללמוד וללמד, לשמוע ולעשות, לקיים את כל ירא שמו תרסך באהבה. ושבתך לבבינו העורל בסודות תורתך הקדושה, ושאציל עלינו אור מקור נשמתנו בכל בכי נועסנו, ושניסנוצצו וניצוצי אבינו רואה משה רבנו עליו השלום, אשר על ידי גאליסה עמקי סודי תורתך, וזכוסי וזכוס כל נביאי ישראל הקדושים וספריהם הקדושם יעמוד לנו ויעמדו לנו שלא ניכשל לעולם ועד מיתז אשרינו מתורתך הקדושה, ולהיות דבריהם נאמנים ונחמדים וחיים וקיימים לעד ולעולמי עולמים, עלינו ועל בנינו ועל דורסנו ועל כל דורס זרע ישראל עבדיך, על הראשונים ועל האחרונים. תורתו וקיים באמת אמונה, חוק ולא יעבור, ונזכה ונחיה ונראה ונירש טוב וברכה לחיי העולם הבא, וזכות התורה הקדושה שבכתב ושבעל פה, הושיענו אדוני אלוהינו וקבצנו מן הגויים, ומלוך על כל העולם כולו בכבודך, וינשא כל הארץ בקורך, והשפיע עלינו אור ישוע ורחמים מאמני ישוע, אמן כן יהי רצון, יהי לרצון עם רפי, והגיוני בי לפניך, אדוני צרי וגואל לי. And that's a special hadron for our say. I look forward. Thank you everybody for coming. Please continue to say